The sun rose over the industrial planet of Zyphora, painting the sky in dull shades of red and orange. The air was thick with smoke from the endless factories and refineries that stretched across the horizon like metal forests. In this harsh and unyielding world, the lives of the workers were short and hope was a rare thing. Among them moved a young woman named Leora, though no one knew the full story of who she was. To the overseers and the other slaves, she seemed quiet, unassuming, and fragile. Her hair was black as night, her skin pale from avoiding the weak sunlight, and her eyes dark pools that seemed to watch everything without revealing emotion. She did what she was told, moving along the factory floors and through the massive mining tunnels, carrying heavy loads and performing labor with silent efficiency. But there was something different about her, something that whispered danger and mystery, even to the most hardened slaves. She moved in a way that was almost unnatural, swift and silent yet always precise. When accidents happened, she was there to react before anyone else, saving lives without a sound, as if she could predict what would happen next. The other slaves noticed it, of course. In quiet corners, they whispered stories about her, calling her a vampire, a shadow, a ghost who walked among them but belonged to no one. Leora never corrected them. She let the stories grow because in Zyphora, a secret was the only shield a person could have. Life on Zyphora was cruel. The overseers, humans enhanced by cybernetic implants, ruled with iron fists. They watched the workers constantly, monitoring their movements, punishing mistakes with brutal efficiency. Any act of rebellion was crushed before it could take shape. Leora had learned to hide her abilities carefully. The others thought she was just another powerless slave, but in truth she was something far more dangerous than they could imagine. That morning, a rumble shook the tunnels beneath the mining complex. A support beam cracked, sending rocks tumbling down toward a group of workers. Screams echoed through the corridor as dust filled the air. Without hesitation, Leora sprinted forward. Her movements were fluid, almost like she was flowing through the chaos. She grabbed the nearest worker, pulling him out of the falling debris just in time. Then, without waiting for thanks or acknowledgement, she leapt across the chasm that had opened in the tunnel, catching another worker and throwing him to safety. The overseers arrived moments later, expecting to see a disaster, but instead they found a scene of controlled chaos. The injured were minimal and those who had been trapped were safe. The overseers' eyes widened as they realized that someone among the slaves had acted with skill and power they had not anticipated. But Leora had already disappeared into the shadows, leaving only whispers behind. That night the workers gathered quietly, speaking in low voices. "Did you see her? She moved like a shadow," one said, his voice trembling. "She's no human," another whispered. "The vampires of old, they said they could move like that in darkness. Maybe she's one of them." Leora listened from a corner, leaning against a support pillar. She did not respond. The truth was far simpler and far more complicated than the rumors. She was human, yes, but she carried within her the blood of warriors, humans enhanced long ago in a forgotten war, trained to survive where others could not. She had memories of battles she had never fought, skills she had yet to master, and instincts that could sense danger before it arrived. To those who did not know, she might seem a creature of myth, but to herself, she was only trying to survive. The next day, her routine continued. She moved among the machines and workers unnoticed by most but always alert. She watched as overseers shouted orders, their voices harsh and mechanical, their cybernetic eyes scanning the workers for the slightest sign of weakness or rebellion. Every day was a test, and every day Leora passed it with quiet grace. It was during one of these mundane days that she noticed something unusual. A shipment of new workers had arrived from another colony. They were frightened, exhausted, and confused, trying to understand the harsh rules of Zyphora. The overseers shoved them roughly, barking commands, expecting obedience without question. Among them was a small boy, no more than 10, who clutched a bag to his chest, his eyes wide with terror. Leora felt a strange pull in her chest. She knew she could not ignore him. When the overseers were distracted, she moved silently toward the boy, offering him a reassuring nod. "Follow me," she whispered, and he hesitated for only a moment before doing as she said. She led him through a series of narrow passages and maintenance corridors that the overseers rarely checked. There she found a hidden space where the two of them could rest safely, away from the eyes of the cruel rulers. As she watched the boy sleep, she allowed herself a small moment of reflection. For years she had hidden her abilities, her past, and even her true nature. She had survived because she had to, because the world demanded it. But there was a part of her that longed for connection, for trust, and for the chance to protect those who could not protect themselves. The boy was the first to earn a place in that part of her heart. The days turned into weeks, and Leora's reputation grew quietly among the slaves. They began to look to her for guidance, even if they did not understand why. Her actions were never reckless. She always chose the right moment to intervene, to help, or to lead. She became a symbol of hope, a whisper of something greater, something beyond the oppressive life of Xiphora. The overseers, however, began to notice. Small incidents were reported, accidents prevented, shipments saved, minor rebellions stopped before they could start. They could not understand who was responsible, only that someone among the slaves was operating outside their control. One evening, an overseer remarked, "There is a shadow among them. Watch her. She is not like the others." Leora continued her work, careful to remain unnoticed by the powerful and feared by the weak. But the whispers of her legend grew louder among the slaves. They began calling her the Shadow of Xiphora, a figure who could move without being seen, who could strike without warning, and who always returned unscathed. Some still whispered vampire, a term that carried fear and fascination, though it was not accurate. Leora never corrected them. Myths were powerful tools, and in a world like Xiphora, power could save lives. One night, while walking through the tunnels to check on the boy and the hidden group of workers, Leora sensed something different. The air felt charged, almost alive, and her instincts screamed danger. She paused, listening carefully. In the distance, she heard the faint hum of mechanical movement, the kind that belonged to the overseer's patrols. But this was different, faster, sharper, more deliberate. Someone had come for her. Without hesitation, she slipped into the shadows, moving silently through the tunnels. Her heart beat steadily, controlled as she assessed the approaching threat. The figure emerged from the darkness, a tall overseer, fully armored with cybernetic enhancements that allowed him to see in complete darkness. He stopped, scanning the corridor, and then spoke in a voice that was calm but commanding. "Leora," he said, "we know you are here. Show yourself." For a moment, she considered fleeing, but then she realized something. This was the moment she had been preparing for, even if she had not known it. She stepped into the light, calm and confident, her presence commanding attention. The overseer's eyes widened slightly, and he instinctively took a step back. He had expected fear, submission, or even chaos, but not the quiet strength that radiated from her. "You do not understand what you face," she said, her voice low but firm. "I am no one's prisoner. I am not a tool, and I will not be controlled." The overseer's jaw tightened, and for a moment the corridor was silent, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant sounds of the industrial world. Then, with a calculated move, she vanished into the shadows once more, leaving him staring in disbelief. As she disappeared, the whispers of the slaves seemed louder in her mind, urging her forward, reminding her of the responsibility she carried. She was not just surviving. She was protecting, leading, and inspiring. And though no one yet knew the full extent of her power, the legend had begun. Leora returned to her hidden refuge, checking on the boy and the others. She smiled faintly, a rare and fleeting expression. In this harsh and merciless world, she had found a way to be more than a slave. She had become a symbol, a shadow that could not be captured, a whisper that carried hope. And in the darkness of Xiphora, that was more dangerous than any weapon the overseers could wield. The night stretched on, but Leora did not rest. She walked the tunnels, observed the workers, and planned for the challenges to come. Because in a world that sought to break humans, she knew one truth above all. Humans could endure, humans could fight, and humans, if clever, determined, and brave, could become legends. The days after the tunnel incident passed quietly, though the tension in Xiphora's mining complex never truly left. Leora moved with her usual silent grace, checking on the hidden group of workers and the young boy who had come under her care. The boy, named Aaron, looked to her with a mixture of awe and trust, never asking questions about her strange abilities, yet sensing that she was unlike anyone he had ever known. Life continued its harsh rhythm, but Leora began noticing patterns in the overseer's patrols, the timing of shipments, and the weaknesses in the surveillance systems. She had spent years observing humans and machines alike, learning their habits, their limitations, and their fears. Now she could predict nearly everything that happened in the mining tunnels before it occurred. It was during one of her routine rounds that she first met Kale, a man who seemed to belong neither to the slaves nor the overseers. He moved carefully, observing, always alert, carrying small tools and devices that hinted at a deep knowledge of machinery. He was a fugitive from the upper levels of Zephora's industrial sectors, a former engineer who had been forced to flee after refusing to assist the corporate overlords in building new weapons. Kyle noticed her before she noticed him. There was something about the way she moved, silent, precise, and full of controlled energy, that caught his trained eye. He waited in the shadows, watching as she guided Aaron and a few of the other young workers past a particularly dangerous section of the tunnel. He had expected the overseers to control everything in this facility, yet here was a single human walking freely, with the confidence of someone who understood the world far better than the rules would allow. "Who are you?" Kale whispered when they finally crossed paths, startling Leora. She had been so focused on the group that she did not hear him approach. "I could ask you the same," she said calmly, though her senses were already analyzing him. His movements were careful, and his eyes, though wary, were intelligent and quick. He carried himself as someone who could survive even in the harshest conditions. "I'm someone who wants to help," he replied, "and I think you might need it." Leora tilted her head slightly. Trust was not something she gave easily. "Why would I need help?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "Because they know about you," Kyle said, his gaze steady. "The overseers, the corporation, they can sense when someone is different. Someone like you. If you are not careful, they will come for you. And when they do, you won't have a chance alone." Leora's expression did not change, but inside she felt a flicker of interest. For years she had hidden her abilities, moved in the shadows, and acted alone. The idea of someone recognizing her skill and even offering aid was both unfamiliar and intriguing. She studied him quietly, weighing the truth in his words. There was honesty in his eyes and a subtle understanding that told her he was not lying. "Then what do you propose?" she asked finally. Kale smiled faintly. "I know ways to strike back. Ways to survive and fight against the overseers. But you can't do it alone. You need allies, strategy, and careful planning. You need to embrace who you really are." For a moment, Leora thought about everything she had kept hidden. Her speed, her strength, her reflexes, skills that seemed to defy human limits. She thought about the whispered stories among the slaves, the fear in the eyes of those who had glimpsed her in moments of crisis. She had always restrained herself, afraid that using her abilities too openly would draw deadly attention. But Kale's words planted a seed. Perhaps it was time to step out of the shadows, to accept that her strength was not just a secret, but a tool for change. Their first collaboration began small. Kale taught her to manipulate the machinery in subtle ways, to create distractions that would make it easier to move unnoticed. He shared knowledge of the overseers' patrol patterns and weaknesses in the cybernetic implants that allowed them to track the slaves. Together they began planning small acts of resistance, rescuing workers from dangerous situations, sabotaging equipment, and testing the limits of what Leora could do without being discovered. One evening, while they were in the tunnels observing a new shipment of prisoners, a warning alarm blared unexpectedly. The overseers had detected unauthorized movement in a nearby section. Leora's instincts kicked in immediately. She motioned for the others to stay quiet and moved like a shadow through the darkness. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. She could hear the faint hum of cybernetic sensors scanning the tunnels, and she adjusted her path to avoid them entirely. When she reached the source of the disturbance, she found a group of young workers trapped behind a collapsed passage. The rocks were heavy, the situation dangerous, but she did not hesitate. With strength and precision that startled even Kale, she lifted and shifted the debris, freeing the trapped group before the overseers could arrive. Her movements were a blur, too fast for the human eye to track. By the time the patrolling overseers reached the scene, the workers were safe and Leora was nowhere to be found. The rescued workers whispered about her in awe. "She's like the shadows themselves," one said. "No one can stop her. She's a vampire," another whispered. "The legends are real." Leora heard the murmurs but did not respond. She did not need their praise or their fear. What mattered was survival and what she could do to protect the weak. Yet inside, a small spark of satisfaction grew. The whispers were no longer just tales. They were recognition of her strength, even if misunderstood. Kale watched from a distance, impressed and cautious at the same time. He realized that Leora was more than just a skilled fighter. She had instincts, intelligence, and the ability to inspire hope, even among those who had never dared to hope before. She's human, he thought. And yet, she is something more. Over the following weeks, Leora and Kale's partnership deepened. They began planning a larger operation, one that could not only save individual slaves but strike a significant blow to the overseer's control. Leora trained in secret, pushing her body and mind to new limits. She learned to move even faster, strike with more precision, and think several steps ahead of her enemies. Every movement was calculated, every action deliberate. During one night, while Kale showed her a hidden archive of old records, Leora discovered something astonishing. The humans of Zephora had not always been mere laborers for the corporation. Long ago, their ancestors had been warriors, genetically and mentally enhanced to survive in harsh environments and to fight with strategy and skill unmatched by ordinary humans. That lineage thought to be lost was part of her. Every instinct she had, every skill she had mastered, was inherited from those long-forgotten ancestors. The revelation changed something inside her. She was not just surviving. She was carrying a legacy. She was the last link to a forgotten line of warriors, humans capable of greatness far beyond what the overseers could imagine. The whispers of vampire among the slaves were not entirely wrong. It was not that she was a supernatural creature, but that her abilities were extraordinary, almost mythic in the eyes of those who did not understand. That night, Leora stood at the edge of the mining tunnels looking up at the sky above Zephora. The red-orange haze of the industrial world stretched endlessly, but she no longer felt small. She felt powerful, capable, and determined. The world had underestimated her for too long, and it was time for her to step forward, not recklessly but with careful planning, courage, and purpose. Kyle approached silently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are ready," he said. "Not just to fight, but to lead. The others are ready too. They just need someone to show them the way." Leora nodded. "Then we will show them," she said, her voice calm and resolute. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has suffered under their control. We will show them that humans cannot be broken." And so in the hidden corridors and shadowed tunnels of Zephora, a plan began to take shape. Leora, once just a quiet, unassuming slave, was becoming something more, a symbol of resistance, a figure of inspiration, and a warrior ready to reclaim the legacy of her people. The first steps were small, carefully calculated, and executed without detection. But each success built confidence among the workers and strengthened the belief that freedom was possible. Whispers of the shadow of Zephora spread quietly, and even the overseers began to notice a pattern. Someone among the slaves was acting with precision, intelligence, and deadly skill. Leora had learned to move in the shadows, to strike where necessary, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. But she had also learned something more important. Power was meaningless if it was not used wisely, and strength was only valuable when it inspired others to rise alongside her. The people of Zephora had never seen a human like her before, and perhaps they never would again. But in the hidden corners of the tunnels, in the quiet whispers of hope, Leora's legend was beginning, and it would not be forgotten. The tunnels of Zephora were no longer just pathways for labor. They had become the veins through which hope flowed. Leora moved through them with quiet confidence, a shadow among shadows. Each step was precise, each breath measured. The whispers of the workers, once timid and uncertain, now carried excitement. "The shadow moves again," they said. "She is saving us, protecting us, leading us." The overseers had begun noticing unusual activity. Machines were sabotaged, shipments delayed, and minor accidents seemed to happen too often to be simple misfortune. Patrols increased, sensors were heightened, and reports flowed endlessly to the upper levels. Yet no one could find the source. One particular overseer, a cybernetic enforcer named Drex, was assigned to investigate. He was relentless, efficient, and known for never failing a mission. For the first time, he faced a challenge that seemed to elude him entirely. Leora, however, had no fear. She had trained, observed, and planned for this. With Kale's guidance and the quiet support of the workers, she had turned the tunnels into a network of intelligence and strategy. They communicated through signals, codes, and whispers, moving with precision to avoid detection while subtly undermining the overseer's control. One day, The corporation sent a shipment of new laborers through the main mining corridor. Among them were children and elderly workers, inexperienced and terrified. Leora noticed immediately. They would be easy targets if the overseers chose to push their limits. She signaled to Kale, and together they devised a plan to divert the shipment into the hidden tunnels. The operation required perfect timing. Leora moved ahead, scouting and preparing traps. She adjusted machinery, weakened support beams slightly to create controlled obstacles and mapped escape routes. Kale followed, directing the workers and coordinating their movements. Every detail had to be flawless. One mistake could end in disaster. As the shipment approached, the overseers grew suspicious. Drex appeared on the scene, his cybernetic sensors scanning for unusual activity. Leora froze for a moment, analyzing his patterns. She saw a window, a split second when the sensors would reset, and she moved. Faster than the eye could follow, she darted through the corridor, guiding the laborers with precise hand signals and quiet directions. When Drex turned to investigate a sudden clatter, it was already too late. The workers had vanished into hidden tunnels, disappearing like smoke. The overseer barked orders, but no one could follow the trail. Leora had anticipated every step, every reaction. The successful operation sent waves of awe through the hidden community. She had not just saved lives, she had proven that the slaves could act with intelligence and courage. The incident sparked discussions among the workers. For the first time, they began thinking beyond mere survival. "If she can do this, then maybe we can fight back," whispered one young man. "Maybe we don't have to stay trapped forever." The seed of rebellion, planted carefully and nurtured by Leora's skill and restraint, was beginning to grow. But the overseers were not idle. Drex, frustrated and humiliated, intensified his search. He began analyzing every corner of the tunnels, every pattern of the workers' movements, and every anomaly in the machinery. Leora anticipated this and increased her precautions. She trained the workers in stealth, escape, and observation. Every day they grew stronger, more coordinated, and more confident. One night, while scouting near the edge of the industrial sector, Leora discovered a new threat. A team of elite enforcers had arrived, enhanced with cybernetic limbs, advanced targeting systems, and training designed to counter human ingenuity. They were sent specifically to capture or neutralize the shadow of Zephora. Her instincts sharpened, and for the first time, she felt the weight of direct confrontation looming. The first clash was sudden. Leora moved silently through the corridors, observing the elite squad as they searched for signs of her presence. They were precise, efficient, and dangerous, but not infallible. She waited, studied their patterns, and struck at the exact moment when they were vulnerable. Using speed, strength, and agility that seemed impossible for a human, she disarmed one and disabled another without alerting the others. Her movements were a blur, calculated and deadly. The elite team realized too late that they were being hunted, not hunting. Leora had turned the shadows into weapons. They tried to regroup, but she was always ahead, using traps, misdirection, and her keen instincts to keep them off balance. By the time Drex arrived to assist, the team was in disarray, scattered and retreating. Leora had won not by brute force alone, but by human ingenuity and adaptability, qualities no machine or cybernetic enhancement could replicate perfectly. The victory sent a message through Zephora. Humans, even under oppression, could resist. They could strategize, adapt, and triumph where technology and brute force failed. Among the hidden workers, the whispers of rebellion grew louder. Leora had become more than a shadow. She was a symbol, a beacon of courage and human potential. Kale watched with a mix of pride and concern. He understood the stakes better than anyone, knowing that this victory would provoke the corporation to respond with even greater force. Yet he also recognized that Leora had awakened something essential in the people: faith in their own strength, in their ability to rise, and in the idea that humans could never be truly controlled. As the days passed, Leora continued her careful campaign of disruption. She did not seek to kill unnecessarily, but to undermine, to teach, and to protect. She guided workers through sabotage missions, rescued those in danger, and used her abilities in ways that no one could predict. The legend of the Shadow of Zephora grew, reaching even the edges of the corporate-controlled sectors. Whispers of a mysterious warrior, a vampire who could move unseen and strike with impossible speed, spread quietly among both slaves and sympathetic citizens. Leora herself felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. She had the power to act alone, yet she understood that leadership required patience, strategy, and the ability to inspire others. Every action she took was carefully measured. She had learned that raw strength without control or purpose could be dangerous, and that true power was shown not just in victory, but in the way it affected those around her. One evening, while resting with Kale and a small group of trusted workers, Leora allowed herself to reflect. "I used to think survival was enough," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the dim light of the tunnel. "But now I see it as not. Survival is not living. We need more than that. We need freedom." Kale nodded. "You are showing them that freedom is possible," he replied. "But it will not come without risk. The corporation will respond and the battles will only grow harder." "I am ready," Leora said, her voice calm but resolute. "I have trained, I have planned, and I have seen what we can accomplish together. They may be stronger, faster, and more dangerous, but humans have something they cannot replicate. Ingenuity, courage, and the will to fight for something greater than themselves. That is our strength." The following days brought a new test. A critical shipment of resources vital to the corporation's operations was scheduled to pass through the tunnels. Leora saw an opportunity not just to disrupt, but to strike a symbolic blow. She gathered a small group of workers, trained and coordinated, and prepared to intercept the convoy. Every detail was considered: the timing, the placement of obstacles, the positioning of escape routes, and the use of the shadows as both cover and weapon. When the shipment arrived, Leora and her team moved like a single organism. They disrupted the transport systems, diverted the path of the convoy, and created controlled chaos that disabled the guards without unnecessary harm. Leora herself acted with precision, moving among the elite enforcers with impossible speed, dismantling their operations and protecting her team at every turn. By the time Drex arrived, he found a scene of disorder and confusion, unable to trace the actions back to her. The workers cheered quietly in the hidden tunnels. They had participated in something larger than themselves. They had acted with skill, courage, and coordination. They had taken a stand, and Leora had led them. In the aftermath, whispers of the shadow of Zephora became legend. The term vampire lingered, not because she was supernatural, but because her abilities and strategy seemed beyond human understanding. The overseers grew more fearful, the corporation more frustrated, yet the people under Leora's guidance were more confident than ever. For the first time, the hidden workers believed in themselves. They had seen what humans could accomplish when guided wisely, when they acted with purpose, and when they embraced their own potential. Leora had not just protected them, she had shown them what it meant to be human, to be resilient, and to be powerful in a way that no machine, weapon, or corporate control could ever suppress. And as she watched over the tunnels that night, Leora felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before: hope. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under oppression, who had been told they were weak, powerless, or insignificant. Humans could endure, humans could fight, and humans could become legends. The battle was far from over. The corporation would not rest, the overseers would not relent, and the threats would continue. But Leora knew one undeniable truth. The people of Zephora had begun to awaken, and with her guidance they would rise. In the days of quiet resistance were over. Leora stood at the edge of the main industrial complex, looking down at the sprawling city below. Zephora was a planet of metal, smoke, and machinery, but now it had become a battlefield in spirit as well as strategy. The whispers of the shadow of Zephora had spread beyond the tunnels, reaching workers in other sectors, and even those who had long believed resistance was impossible began to take heart. Kale approached, carrying a small datapad filled with schematics of the factory and patrol patterns of the overseers. "We have enough support now," he said. "Not everyone is ready to fight, but enough to strike a real blow. If we act now, we can liberate the main sector and show the corporation they cannot control us forever." Leora nodded. Her eyes were sharp, her mind focused. She knew this would be the hardest challenge yet. The overseers would not come lightly, and the corporation had resources that could crush any human opposition. Yet humans had something they could not copy: creativity, courage, and the will to fight for freedom. That would be their advantage. The plan was simple in principle, though dangerous in execution. Leora would lead a coordinated strike on the central processing facility, where the overseers controlled the mining operations and the shipment of resources. The workers would act as both diversions and reinforcements, moving with stealth and precision to disrupt systems and free prisoners. Kyle would manage communications, ensuring that everyone knew their role and timing. The night before the operation, Leora walked through the hidden tunnels, speaking quietly with those who would follow her into battle. She gave instructions calmly, reinforcing the importance of strategy and cooperation. "We do this not to destroy, but to liberate," she told them. "We move together, we watch each other, and we strike only when necessary. Every life matters. Every action counts." The workers nodded, inspired by her presence and the quiet strength she exuded. They had seen her move like a shadow, act with impossible speed, and protect the vulnerable. They had followed her in small acts of resistance, and now they were ready to stand beside her in a full challenge to the overseers. At dawn, the operation began. Leora led the way, moving through the complex with precision and awareness. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. The first group of workers followed her lead, sabotaging machinery and creating diversions, while ensuring that no one was harmed unnecessarily. Guards were disoriented, caught off guard by the coordinated actions and the sudden skill of the workers, who acted with more courage than they had ever known. When Leora encountered the elite enforcers sent by the corporation, she faced them not with hesitation but with calm determination. They were faster, stronger, and heavily augmented, yet she moved with skill and strategy beyond their calculation. She struck with precision, using speed and agility to dismantle their operations, never pausing, never faltering. Her movements seemed to flow with the shadows themselves, making it impossible for her enemies to predict her next action. Drex arrived on the scene, his cybernetic enhancements scanning the area. He was confident, expecting to crush any opposition, but he had not accounted for the combination of human ingenuity and unity. Leora anticipated his actions, guiding the workers to strategic positions, using the environment as both shield and weapon. When he moved to attack, she was already 3 steps ahead, exploiting weaknesses in his patterns and striking decisively to disable his weapons. The battle spread across the facility. Workers moved through hidden passages, freeing prisoners and sabotaging operations. Leora and Kale coordinated with precision, ensuring that everyone knew their role and could act without confusion. The corporate enforcers, though technologically advanced, were overwhelmed by the creativity, coordination, and determination of humans who refused to be controlled. In one moment, Leora faced a massive cybernetic overseer, a machine of destruction designed to annihilate human resistance. Its movements were mechanical, precise, and relentless, yet Leora was faster, more adaptable, and more cunning. She dodged its strikes using the environment to her advantage, and struck at weak points in its structure that no machine could have predicted. Piece by piece, she dismantled it, demonstrating that human skill and intelligence could surpass even the deadliest technology. As the facility fell into chaos, the workers realized that they were no longer victims. They had power, coordination, and hope. They moved with confidence, guided by Leora's example. When the central control room was reached, Leora stood at its entrance looking at the systems that had governed oppression for so long. With a few precise actions, she disabled the control systems, cutting off the overseer's command and creating a clear path for the liberated workers. The victory was not just physical but symbolic. It demonstrated that humans, when united and guided wisely, could overcome forces that seemed invincible. The whispers of the shadow of Zephora transformed into loud voices of triumph. The legend had become reality, and the people understood that their potential was greater than they had ever imagined. Drex, witnessing the defeat and the courage of the workers, realized the truth he had long ignored. Humans were not weak, and they were not meant to be controlled. Leora's strength was not just in her abilities, but in the way she inspired others to rise, think, and fight for themselves. Even in the face of overwhelming technology and authority, humans could prevail when guided by intelligence, courage, and unity. After the battle, Leora gathered the workers in the hidden tunnels. They were tired, bruised, and frightened, yet their faces glowed with newfound confidence. "You have all shown bravery beyond what anyone could have expected," Leora said, her voice calm but powerful. "This is only the beginning. The world may try to control us, but we have proven that humans cannot be broken. We are clever, adaptable, and strong. We have the power to create a future where freedom is not just a dream but a reality." The workers cheered, their voices echoing through the tunnels. For the first time, they believed in themselves. They had faced fear, danger, and impossible odds, and they had triumphed. They had followed Leora, and in doing so, they had discovered their own strength. Kale stood beside her, smiling faintly. "You have done more than lead them," he said. "You have shown them what it means to be human. You have turned hope into action." Leora allowed herself a rare smile. "It was never just me," she replied. "It was all of us. Humans are strong not because of what we can do alone, but because of what we can achieve together. That is our legacy." As the sun set over, Sci-Fi painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Leora looked out at the workers who now walked with confidence, not fear. The factories and tunnels would not be free overnight, and the corporation would not surrender easily. But a spark had been ignited. A spark that could not be extinguished. A spark born of human courage, intelligence, and determination. The legend of the shadow of Zephora was no longer just a whisper. It was a reality. She had led the people through darkness, shown them the power of unity and ingenuity, and revealed that humans, even when oppressed, could rise to greatness. The term vampire lingered among those who had seen her act with impossible speed and precision, but now it was a symbol of respect, fear, and admiration, a reminder that humans were capable of extraordinary feats. In the quiet moments after the battle, Leora walked through the tunnels alone, reflecting on what had been achieved. She thought of Aaron, the young boy who had inspired her to protect the innocent, and of all the workers who had found courage in her example. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight and more lives to protect. But she also knew that the people of Zephora would never again accept being controlled, and that humans, when united and guided by purpose, could overcome any obstacle. The industrial city below was still alive with smoke and machines, but it was also alive with possibility. Leora had transformed from a shadowy figure into a leader, a warrior, and a symbol. The people no longer whispered fearfully of a vampire. They spoke with pride of the woman who had shown them what humans could truly achieve. And as night fell over Zephora, Leora stood at the edge of the tunnels, her eyes scanning the horizon. The fight was not over, but the path was clear. Humans had risen, their courage and intelligence unbound, and the legend of the shadow of Zephora would endure. No force could stop them now. Humans had proven that they were more than tools, more than slaves, more than victims. They were warriors, thinkers, and leaders. They were extraordinary in every way, and they would never be forgotten. Leora smiled, faintly, a shadow in the night who had become a light for the people. She had fulfilled her purpose, yet she knew her journey continued. The rebellion had begun, and the legacy of humans, strong, clever, and unbreakable, was only just beginning.